Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm going to give it just a couple of minutes for any late attendees just to log in so they don't miss the start. In the meantime, if I could ask that you can confirm that you can hear me okay in the chat box on the right hand side. If you can just type in yes or like my comment, just so I know there's no issues with the sound, as I don't really want to be talking to myself this afternoon. If you could just confirm that, and then we'll get the presentation underway very shortly. It normally takes about 20 minutes just to talk through the information, and then any questions you've got we'll answer at the end. So I'll give it just another couple of minutes for any late attendees, like I say. Just to let you know that myself and Gareth doing the presentation today are both working from home, so there may be some background noise from pets, etc. So apologies, we will try and keep the noise to a minimum. But yes, thank you for those who've liked the comments. I'll give it just another minute and then we'll get the presentation underway. Thank you. Okay, I can see a few more people are just joining. I'll give it one more minute and then we'll start. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the screen okay. My name is Gemma Callow. I am the Communications Manager for the Clean Air Zone, leading on stakeholder engagement. I'm joined today by my colleague Gareth Wood, who's a Senior Clean Air Zone Officer. And what we're going to do today is just talk you through an overview of how the zone will operate when it comes into effect, who's going to be charged, etc., and talk through some of the support that's available in the form of exemptions and financial incentives. So we are recording this. We will circulate a link to the recording afterwards for you to share with family and friends, etc. if you find it helpful, which we hope you do. And with that in mind, we'll get underway. So the Clean Air Zone is being introduced because poor air quality has been declared a national health emergency. Every year, between 28 and 36,000 people across the UK are dying from conditions linked to poor air quality, including cancer, heart disease and lung disease. Of those people, about 900 of them are based in Birmingham, so they're Brummies who are dying from these conditions. And I won't run through all the stats on screen, but what I think it's always important to point out is that our children are actually adversely affected because they're smaller and they're closer to the ground and closer to those concentrated exhaust fumes. They inhale 3 times as much air pollution than we do as adults, which impacts on their growth and development and means they're 4 times more likely to have reduced lung function when they become grown-ups. So those are the figures on screen. Like I say, I won't run through them all, but the top line is it's a national health emergency and we are tasked by government that we have to do something. So prior to COVID, we undertook some research into how people were travelling into Birmingham city centre. And what we ascertained was that 50% of all journeys were undertaken by private car. And of those journeys, 250,000 of them every single day were car journeys for less than 1 mile. So we're talking about a 20-minute walk, a 10-minute cycle ride, a trip on the tram or the bus. So what the Clean Air Zone is looking to do in the first instance is to deter high polluting vehicles from entering the city centre, but secondly, get people to reconsider their travel habits. So for those short journeys in particular, encourage more people to take sustainable and active travel options to further reduce the number of vehicles on our roads contributing towards air pollution. So clean air zones are going to be introduced across the country. Bath was the first city outside of London to go live. They went live last month and we are next, and we will launch on the 1st of June this year. However, they will be followed by clean air zones in Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, etc. So each local authority sets the boundaries for their clean air zone and decides on what charging category. We have chosen a category D clean air zone, which means that all high polluting vehicles, including private cars, will be subject to the charge. In Bath, where they've chosen a category C, They will not be charging private vehicles, but we have chosen to do that here in Birmingham. So that means non-compliant buses, taxis, vans, lorries and cars will be subject to the charge. It's important to note that a clean air zone is not the same as a congestion charge. So in London, where there's a congestion charge, every single vehicle is charged to drive through a designated area. In Birmingham,
Hi, Gemma, sorry, we've had a question to say that the slides do not seem to be moving on.
Apologies.
So thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll see if we can correct it now.
Thank you. Let me come out and restart. Apologies for this. Is that better?
Yeah, that's working now. That's certainly what I can see. If anybody at this point isn't able to see the slides as a presentation, please just message again. If nobody messages, we'll just assume that you can see them now. And I think if Gemma may have mentioned, but the actual presentation itself and the slides that she's already covered in the introductory part will be available afterwards, just in case anybody wants to see them.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you to those who've pointed out the problems. So as I was saying, London has a congestion charge. Every vehicle that drives through a designated area in London is subject to paying that charge. In Birmingham, where we have a clean air zone, it is only the most high polluting vehicles that will be charged, and we estimate that's about 1 in 4 vehicles. So the clean air zone is the blue area that you can see on screen. It's everywhere within the A4540 Middleway, but not the Middleway itself. So on the 1st of June, if you're in a compliant vehicle that meets the emission standards, you can drive through that blue area absolutely fine, as you would do now, and you do not need to take any action. The only action that needs to be taken is by those people who have vehicles that don't meet the emission standards. So on the 1st of June, if your vehicle does not meet the emission standards, you can drive around the A4540 Middleway, that's fine. But if you enter the blue area in a non-compliant vehicle, you will be subject to the daily charge. That daily charge is £8 a day for cars, taxis and vans, and £50 a day for HGVs, coaches and buses. A day is midnight to midnight, not 24 hours from when you enter the zone. But during that midnight to midnight time frame, you can enter and leave the zone as many times as you want for a single charge. However, if you drive in at say 10 PM, leave at 3 AM, you've crossed that midnight threshold and would need to therefore pay twice. You must pay online or over the phone using the government payment system, and you must pay 6 days prior to the day of your visit, the day of your visit, or 6 days after. So it's a 13-day payment window. If you fail to pay within that 13-day payment window, you'll be sent a fixed penalty notice in the post for £120. So if you were to drive into that zone for say a week, Monday to Friday, going to work, fail to make any payments, you would get 5 fixed penalty notices in the post. That's £600. It's important to note that you won't receive a text or an email to say you've entered the zone and that you need to make payment. This will be the same as London in the sense of the onus is on you as a driver to know if your vehicle is subject to the charge, to know that you've entered and to make payment on time. We've got 300 signs that we're installing on the boundary and approach to the zone, warning that you're entering a chargeable area, but that is the only warning you will get. So the big question is, will I be charged and is my vehicle compliant? So the easiest thing to do is to go onto the Brumbury's website where there is a link to the government vehicle checker. You can enter your registration details and it will tell you whether or not you're subject to the charge. The emission standards we're looking for though that you can find in your V5C logbook are for a Euro 4 petrol or better, a Euro 6 diesel or better, gas Euro 6, fully electric, fully hydrogen fuel cell, or a hybrid electric that meets those petrol and diesel standards referenced earlier. To put it into context, most petrol vehicles at Euro 4 standard came into circulation from about 2006 onwards, and most Euro 6 diesels came into circulation from September 2015 onwards. I have to stress those dates are a guidance only. It is the Euro standard that we're looking for. So like I say, please go onto the government vehicle checker, enter your registration and check if you'll be charged. Contrary to media reports, the zone is not intended to be a money-making scheme for the council. If we make no money from the Clean Air Zone, then that's fantastic news, because it means there are no high polluting vehicles driving through the city centre, therefore air quality will improve, and that is our objective. However, we do know that particularly in the early days, we will make money from this scheme. So we have to reinvest that money in transport related projects and policies. It cannot be used to support the council's general budget and fund services such as bin collections or repairs to the flues in the jacuzzi. So some of the schemes we've identified so far for investment are introducing controlled parking zones on the boundary of the Clean Air Zone around the A4540 Middleway. That's to protect residents by stopping people from dumping their cars on the outskirts and walking in. We're funding a hydrogen bus pilot for 20 buses that will come into circulation later this year. And we'll be investing in improvements to city centre pedestrianisation and active travel routes such as cycle lanes, so that walking and cycling becomes safer and more appealing for people to do, particularly with reference to those 250,000 journeys I referenced earlier that are for less than 1 mile. At this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Gareth, and he's going to talk through the support that's available. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks, Gemma, and thank you for everyone for making time in your day to attend this webinar. We really appreciate you finding time to take a look at the general overview of the Clean Air Zone and some of the support in place. So with that in mind, I'll move on to the section that relates to exemptions. There's also some additional financial support information that comes up shortly, but if we look at the exemptions first, I'll just run through those. So you'll see in obviously very much on the slide there, we have what's known as short-term exemptions. These can also be referred to as local exemptions, and you'll see that 2 years there, it pertains to residents who live within the Clean Air Zone. So regardless of income or anything along those lines, if you're a resident and within the Clean Air Zone's boundaries and you have a non-compliant vehicle, you can apply for and access a 2-year exemption from the zone's launch date on the 1st of June this year, which would take you up until the end of May 2023. As an aside, if anybody here does actually qualify for this and does do it, please bear in mind you'll initially be issued with a 1-year exemption, and we will contact you in May of 2022 or before then in order to ask you to just confirm that it's still applicable for the 2nd year. Obviously people can move in and out of areas, they can also no longer have the same vehicle, so it's important that we check on that before we issue the 2nd year. In terms of 1-year exemptions, the main area for that in many respects in terms of the volume and the people it affects are people who work within the Clean Air Zone, earn no more than £30,000 per year and work a minimum of 18 hours per week. We are issuing them if they meet that criteria with a 1-year exemption from the zone's launch date, which take them up to end of May 2022 for their non-compliant vehicle. We'll come on to some financial support, which is also applicable for people who generally may meet this category shortly. Also commercial vehicles, so vehicles that are that belong to businesses within the zone, they'll also be able to access exemptions, full details of which, like everything else, can be found on our Brunbury's website. And visitors to hospitals, actually, which is medical centres, some medical centres within the Clean Air Zone, including the Children's Hospital. And this is a 12-month exemption, but would be issued ad hoc on each visit itself, so each individual visit to one of the medical centres or the hospital. And this would be done or will be done via a voucher system. So when people who have a non-compliant vehicle may need to visit one of these medical centres for an appointment or for an emergency, particularly in mind with the Children's Hospital for the emergency aspect of this, if they have a non-compliant vehicle, when they drive in to attend, they'll be able to get a voucher which they can subsequently enter online, and that negates any potential charge for that visit and for that 24-hour charging period in which they would have come in and come out. So that's one of the other short-term exemptions. Next slide, please, Gemma. Thank you. These are ongoing or indefinite exemption types, and they're sometimes referred to as national exemptions as well, because they'll be applicable not only for Birmingham's Clean Air Zone, but potentially applicable for those other clean air zones as well. You'll see that motorcycles, for instance, are non-chargeable. These are exemptions that, for motorcycles at least, people don't have to make an application for. They just won't be included. Vehicles with disabled or disabled passenger tax class, which is otherwise known as tax class 85. That is a type of exemption for vehicles generally modified for the purpose of transportation, and people can access an ongoing exemption for that, something that they don't have to apply for. Show vehicles and specialist vehicles and historic vehicles, along with community and school transport, are generally exemptions that people will have to apply for in order for us to process those. So again, the website can direct for the process around those. Some of the exemptions, like the residence exemption, community exemption, and the workers exemption, they're done through our online application portal, whereas some of the others, quite specialist, of course, in showman's vehicles, they tend to come to us via a different process with proof of the legitimacy being included on the email that gets sent to us, and then we'll process that separately. So yeah, just a note on community and school transport. These vehicles usually regarded as section 19 or 22, and broadly they relate to not-for-profit transportation purposes, hence the reason that they generally refer to school or community use vehicles. Next slide, please, Gemma. So I mentioned briefly earlier on about financial support in place to assist. You'll see here that we have £35 million, or had, because it's already going down, we're already issuing grants, and this is broken down quite simply into three parts, with £10 million being for what's known as the scrappage scheme and mobility credits. And I mentioned earlier on about people who work within the clean air zone and qualify for that 1-year exemption for their non-compliant vehicle. Some of them, depending on the time or the length of period that they've had the vehicle for, will also qualify for the scrappage scheme and the mobility credit scheme. Scrappage scheme, in short, and we made a recent announcement about Motorpoint as our partner for this, it is scrappage of the present non-compliant car with up to £2,000 credit to be used at Motorpoint for the purchase of a compliant vehicle, which can be a straight cash purchase or straight purchase there and then, or it could be used towards financing of a vehicle. There are numerous options with that, so we welcome people to investigate that further. The actual process for applying for the scrappage scheme will be open very soon, just in the final stages of testing that database now, making sure that everything works correctly. And mobility credits, as it sounds, is a public transportation credit / Swift card style option of people scrapping their present non-compliant vehicle in favour of that same amount of credit towards public transportation passes. Again, that's something that will be open for application soon. The second funding pot relates to small medium enterprises, businesses in the West Midlands, generally with heavy goods vehicles and coaches. So that's under what's known as our HDV fund, which is heavy duty vehicle fund. And that money similarly is to help businesses, fleets upgrade and replace non-compliant vehicles in favour of compliant vehicles, or vehicles that can be retrofitted to make them meet the criteria for compliance within the zone. And finally, £15 million is for our taxi community, so that's for private hire vehicles and hackney carriage vehicles. There's a wide range of funding types available there, so there's money, for instance, towards up to £5,000 grants for people to purchase a compliant hackney carriage, or to retrofit a hackney carriage, or even to lease an electric or a hybrid hackney carriage vehicle for use. And subsequently, for private hire vehicles, there's up to £2,000 towards the purchase of a compliant vehicle. And again, some of the funding pots there to enable retrofit or improvement of those vehicles to take them into a greener emission standard. and to meet the requirements of the Clean Air Zone. Yeah, that's generally our funding pots explained. We are paying out grant money already, which is great. We've had terrific uptake on the taxi schemes, as well as applications for the HDV fund, and we've had a lot of interest for the scrappage scheme, and as soon as that's open, I'd imagine we will have a great many applications as well. Thanks, Gemma. Next slide, please. There's a brief slide here actually just about Birmingham's transport plan, and it leads into the next slide, which discusses the Clean Air Zone as an enabler of change. But really what I'd like to refer to here in general is the fact that the Clean Air Zone is really one aspect of Birmingham's broader transportation plan. You can see here that the vision is what is described as smart, innovative, carbon neutral and low emission transport network that will support sustainable, inclusive economic growth, tackle climate change, promote the health and well-being of Birmingham citizens. So our vision is to improve everything holistically, to improve the city, to make it a healthier, safer place to travel through, to do our part in reaching carbon net zero by 2030, and then nationally I believe the target still remains as 2050. And in order to do that, we have broken it down for the purpose of the schemes themselves into these 4 areas, or big moves as they're referred to. So they generally lead into one another, and they're pretty tangible in that it's a reallocation of road space that makes the city more attractive for or more usable for people wanting to cycle, pedestrians. That's an important part to change the road space as it exists in the city centre at the moment, and part of doing that, of course, is transforming the city centre and making substantial and significant changes to pedestrianisation, to the accessibility and preference therein of public transportation where possible, for people to actually use that and to make that more workable, and to constantly improve and evolve that. And of course, within reallocation of road space, it does naturally, we prioritise active travel. The easier it is for people to use cycles or to go on foot through the city centre, and the differences of private cars being able to access the city as they can now, and how that will change in the future. That naturally prioritises active travel, and we have a great many schemes coming in as part of the transport plan that further enable that. But we're mindful, of course, in coming into the last big move, as it were, to manage demand and to understand the effects of the introduction of many of these schemes. And one example of how we'd manage demand relates to parking, not least the parking within the city, but outside. One of the things that's come up quite a lot with regards to the Clean Air Zone and its boundaries is how does that affect an area that's on the edge, just outside of the Clean Air Zone? What if people with non-compliant vehicles think that they can try and park there and then come into the zone, therefore sidestepping potential charges, but not having to change the vehicle? And one of the schemes that's in place, I think it's already I think it's Lowe's Elves, but that we're looking at presently, and then more areas will follow, are resident parking permits, which will preclude people from potentially using those outlying districts of the Clean Air Zone's periphery as a place to park up and then come in and avoid charges. So we're mindful, it's not solving any issue, to quite simply to move the issue, and we are consistently monitoring air pollution, and will continue to monitor emission levels as we go through this and make any necessary adjustments to how we manage aspects of this on the outskirts of the city as we move forward. Next slide, please, Gemma. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier on the notion of the Clean Air Zone as an enabler of change. It is for a number of reasons. We're the first city to roll out a Category D Clean Air Zone, as Gemma mentioned, but we certainly won't be the last, and Clean Air Zones themselves are going to increase in frequency. It enables us to work consistently with businesses, communities, and to work in unison really to improve the environment within the city and therefore outside of it, to improve emission levels. And the Clean Air Zone itself not only enables us to do that in a general sense, but it's also via it supports some very specific programs, including expansion of the city's electric vehicle charging points. So like a lot of cities, we don't have as many charging points presently as we would like, and that makes the adoption of electric vehicles less attractive because it's harder, for instance, with taxi drivers, if they want to use electric taxis, harder for them to do that when there's a lack of charge points. So as part of the Clean Air Zone scheme, we're planning to introduce around 200 more electric charge points, so that will help improve the accessibility and the uptake of electric vehicles. Additionally, you'll see there, I'll skip the hydrogen buses for a moment because I mentioned taxis, but we're purchasing up to 50 electric hackney carriages, which, along with the introduction of the charge points, leads to the adoption of the technology itself. And these will be available for hackney carriage drivers within the city to rent and to use accordingly. And in similarly with public transportation, purchase of hydrogen buses, 20 hydrogen buses, which will hopefully encourage and demonstrate the technology itself throughout the city and then grow that exponentially. Thanks, Gemma. Next slide. And that's that. It's the last slide. So yeah, so moving into this final slide here, it's just some information here about how people can stay up to date with developments around the Clean Air Zone and how they can contact us. That email address at the top is really important. There is a national help desk for Clean Air Zone inquiries in general, because the Clean Air Zone initiative is a central government initiative and it's administered at a local level by city councils or local authorities as and when required to introduce a Clean Air Zone. So that email address there, cleanair@birmingham.gov.uk, particularly useful for local inquiries because it gets you straight to a member of our Clean Air Zone team, and we're all based or work as part of Birmingham City Council, so we'll be able to get back to you very quickly, usually within 2 working days. And you'll see there also our addresses on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and ways in which you can follow developments of the Clean Air Zone and contact us. If anyone has any questions now, we'd love to hear them and hopefully answer them. If something dawns on you after the webinar or something comes up in the coming days or weeks that you'd like to ask, please don't hesitate and contact us straight away, and we will respond to you and provide any and all support you may require. So from me, thank you very much, pending any questions, and I'll stand back over to Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll give it a few minutes to see if any questions come in. I can't see any at the moment. I think the main takeaway from today is please go online, check if you're going to be charged. If you're not charged, great, you don't need to take any action. If you are subject to those charges, check if you're eligible for an exemption and financial support. And if you are, please apply as soon as possible. If you are eligible for an exemption, you need to provide us with all your application and supporting evidence by the 10th of May to be guaranteed a permit in time for the launch of the zone. After that, we cannot guarantee you'll get your permit in time, and you may therefore be subject to charges. So I'll give it another couple of minutes, see if there's any questions that come in, and if not, we will thank you very much for your time and let you go on with your day. So just go on silent for a couple of moments. We've had one come in. Do you know when further information will be available on the scrappage scheme and how this works in more detail, please? Sorry if I've missed this. Thank you, Hannah, for your question. We are working, finalising the terms and conditions of that scrappage scheme at the moment, and we are hoping to make an announcement over the next couple of weeks. We are hoping to launch that in time for the Clean Air Zone. The best thing or piece of advice I can give you is to go onto our website. I will put the link in the chat and register an expression of interest in the scheme. Those who are on that list will be the first to be notified of any updates and when you can apply, etc. At the moment, what we would suggest is that you check the eligibility criteria so that you meet the conditions of having owned the vehicle for long enough, and less than £30,000, etc. If you are, check out the options on Motorpoint if you think you're going to need finance to bridge any gap in payments. And then, like I say, if you register an expression of interest, then we can ensure that you're the first to be notified. What will happen in general practice, though, is that you'll take your non-compliant vehicle to Motorpoint, scrap it through them, and then receive the option of either £2,000 off the cost of a car from Motorpoint or £2,000 mobility credit, such as a Swift card from Transport for West Midlands. I'll just add the link in the chat now.
Thanks. I've had a couple more questions here. So there's one about, will we send the slides out? Gemma, can you confirm how the slides will be available?
Yeah, we'll send a copy of the recording out. So we'll send everybody who's registered for this webinar will be sent a link to this recording so they can watch back.
Thanks.
And that will happen in the next couple of days.
There's a couple of other questions here I shall attempt to answer. So what if a worker is required to work at multiple sites, some of which are in the clean air zone, and they still be exempted? Yeah, it's a good question, because we're aware that there's a real variety potentially of worker employment types that and position types. Of course, we're cognizant of that. And yeah, the actual exemption application process in terms of being eligible for it, it is about meeting that criteria. So there are people who do work for the required amount of time of 18 hours per week within the clean air zone, but then would also work outside of the clean air zone and meet also the earning requirements. What I would advise is that if you can evidence that you meet that minimum amount of time working within the clean air zone on a regular basis via support from your employer, from manager, from HR team, along those lines, and then can provide the other proofs, the proof of earnings that meets with the exemption criteria, then absolutely we would welcome an application, and hopefully we would be able to issue the exemption. So it's really all about your eligibility against the criteria. So like I say, earning no more than £30,000 per year and working within the clean air zone for no less than 18 hours per week. If that can be evidenced, then we would welcome an application. So I hope that's answered that question. And we have another question here from Kiyomi. Will the permits be interchangeable between vehicles? No, in short, they can be, depending. So for instance, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you're a resident within the clean air zone and you presently owned a non-compliant vehicle and you were issued with a clean air zone exemption from charges for 2 years, and then subsequently you obtained another non-compliant vehicle as a resident within the clean air zone, we would look to be able to continue the exemption. But it would depend on circumstances, of course, and I don't know if that is exactly what you mean, or whether or not you mean that the exemption is the exemption for the person or for the vehicle. It's for the vehicle, but that also applies to the type of exemption it is. So if you give me a specific answer or a specific example perhaps of what type of exemption or permit this refers to, I'll try to answer it further, but hopefully that's explained it. Let me know if it hasn't. I don't know if we have any further questions.
I think just adding on from that, Gareth, it's important to note that the permit will not be anything physical that you display in your car. It's a digital permit that's registered to a back-end system. So if you were thinking, and again, I'm not entirely sure of what your question was referring to in specifics, but if you were thinking it's a permit that you can take out of one car and place into another, no, that would not be the case. Okay, we'll give it another couple of minutes, see if anything further comes in. We'll give it till 12:37. It's 12:36, so we'll give it a minute. Okay, it doesn't look like we're going to get any more questions. So thank you very much on behalf of myself and Gareth for taking time out of your day. Hopefully that's answered some questions and explained things for you. If not, please go on the website, and thank you, Hannah, for your comments. Please go on the website, check out the information, check if you're charged, check if you're eligible for an exemption. If so, please apply. If you're interested in receiving updates, please sign up to the Brumbury's newsletter. If you're interested in the financial incentives, please sign up to that expression of interest. It's a separate update where you'll be notified directly about that scheme. Otherwise, please share this message with family, friends, colleagues. We want as many people as possible to be aware of what's happening on the 1st of June and prepared for it. Like I say, it's not our intention to raise money from this. It is our intention to tackle air pollution. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.